This is Cold Start.
And today we're welcomed by another guest, Brian Flynn. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, for idling with us here at Cold Start. So you're the Executive Vice President and GM of Sonoma Raceway. And we understand that earlier in your career, you were affiliated with the Richard Petty experience, running that whole thing, the race team for NASCAR for several years. We have to ask and get this out of the way, but we have to ask you for a Richard Petty story.
I don't know if we have enough time in this podcast.
Oh, no. Tell us about the King.
The King's awesome. Talk about this all the time. I had a front row seat with the legend, the King, how he treated people, how he thought about the sport. He built the sport. His family built the sport. And to see that on a regular basis is one of the highlights of my career in life. And when Richard started racing, and really he quickly learned what it meant and how important those fans were, because if they don't show up, they're paying the gate. They're really paying his purse, his prize money. And the more he connected with the fans, the more that he liked them or they liked him, the more maybe would come to the race, and maybe the purses would grow and such, and they did. And he just liked it. He connected with the fans. And if you go back in history, Richard Petty with his STP sponsorship was one of the early sponsors in all of racing, and then it really connected with him that all he ever wanted to do was just race, right? He didn't really. This is going to sound bad. He liked the fan part of it, but he knew that he needed the fan so he could just get out there and race, and that was money into the piggy bank, if you will. And then when the sponsorship came in, it really started to, for him, I wouldn't say explode, but it really cemented his understanding of how it worked. So he would say, I can sell your product one time, but your product has to be good enough so that they buy it multiple times, in the frequency. So it's got to be a good product. I think I can help you sell the first product, but it's got to be good. So the STP and, the sponsorship game today is completely different, similar and different, where, you could identify that 43 car was red and blue with the STP identification on her livery. And you just knew that was Richard Petty, right? Just like Dale Earnhardt in the 3 car and all, Jeff Gordon in the 24 car. We're talking NASCAR, right? And Darrell Waltrip in the Tide car and all that stuff. Well, now they've bifurcated it all and they've cut it all up. So the consistency is gone. But Richard learned and knew what that meant. And he would just go from track to track, and it would let him earn a living by being a race car driver. And that's all he ever wanted to do. And he did it quite well. And I would watch, having been around him and gone on hundreds of appearances with him, there'd be a track opening and there'd be all the current NASCAR drivers. And Richard knew how to work the crowd, and he knew how to, throw shade to his the younger generation of drivers. And he'd come in last, he'd kind of wait, and he'd time it, cowboy hat and sunglasses, and he was like a Cheshire cat in that respect. He just knew how to do that, and he loved doing that because he just liked to needle the younger generation. It was never an arrogance, right? He was just like, this is how we do it, right? This is how you need to do it.
Yeah, well, the best racers have the big picture in mind, right, when they're out there on track. So being aware of the business, what makes you successful, bringing the fans, bringing the sponsors, having that identity all intertwined. I mean, this was in the early days of all this stuff, so he had a mind for all of that.
Yeah, he put the sport on his back and carried it with a bunch of other people, the France family, Bruton Smith, our founding father, and there's probably 5 or 7 people that Junior Johnsons, and they just it was a different era, right? And they knew what they had to do, because all they really wanted to do was line up and beat each other up for 3 hours and come out with the trophy.
So was that position that you had at Petty Enterprises or Petty Holdings, was that your first job in motorsports?
No, I actually started with the Bechtel family. I started coming to Sears Point Raceway, which is Sonoma Raceway, in 1993. So my father-in-law worked for the Bechtel family, and one of the Bechtels, Gary Bechtel and his wife Carolyn at the time, they were in North Carolina. He was running Bechtel Civil, and they wanted to go racing. And I'd never really been to a race other than a local short track in Miami. I grew up in Miami, and My parents were from New York, so they went to Islip Speedway, and they, just fun Saturday night type of outings. And everybody knew about Richard Petty and all that. So my brother-in-law called me up one day and said, we're going to the Charlotte Coke 600. It's like 1991 or something. So I went to the race, was blown away at the spectacle. And lo and behold, 2 years later, Gary and Carolyn are starting a race team. And my brother-in-law said, well, you need to hire my brother-in-law. And I knew nothing about the sport. And one thing led to another. And next thing I know, we're moving to Charlotte, North Carolina to run Gary and Carolyn Bechtel's race team, Diamond Ridge Motorsports. We were really one of the first satellite operations of the multi-car team that exists now for Hendrick Motorsports. So I think Rick and Gary and Felix Sabatas at the time all knew each other. They all lived in Quail Hollow and hung around each other, being movers and shakers in the Charlotte community. And I think really what happened was they found a way to offload their used equipment to a guy like Gary. But they took us under their wing, and we had a management services and equipment agreement with them. And we tagged along with Ray Everham and Terry Labonte and Jeff Gordon and Kenny Schrader at the time. And they kind of shepherded us through our first couple of years, which is really great for me, coming into the sport, knew nothing about the sport. And you find out in a hurry, as you guys know, that if you're going to be in the sport, the circus comes to town every week, and it moves every week. And so we went racing Thursday through Sunday, 31 weeks a year. It was 31 races at the time. And that was my first go around as the team president, and had no business being the team president. But I was the owner's representative, and Gary didn't go to that many races. So you learn very quickly. And it was a great, I would have never been hired in that way by a team, but because of Gary and his wife and our family connection to the Bechtels, more trust and confidence, and was really how I earned my way in. And then I earned my stripes and all the good things that we all learn in racing. And the school of hard knocks comes quickly, and we just went racing. And then he decided he didn't want to race anymore. And I had met the Petty guys, been around them, and they had a driving experience business that was growing rapidly. And I started my career with the Pettys on the driving experience side. But that's how I got into racing through the Bechtel family.
It seemed like you were amazed by like the spectacle of NASCAR, which back in that day, I mean, it was massive. It was huge. There was so many fans and so much excitement. Was that what made you fall in love with the sport and motorsports and wanting to stick around, was just like the energy and the community aspect of NASCAR?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As you all know, as racers, right, there's so many things that attract you and attract racers to the sport. The competition is certainly first and foremost, but there's so many levels of that. There's the business aspect, there's the fan aspect, there's the competitive aspect, but it's all about the people, right? The people in the sport, the people near the sport, the industry, the track side, the owner side, the driver side, the crew chief side, the partner side, the television partner side. I mean, the myriad of stakeholders in the sport is tremendous. And that's not unlike any other business, but I think coming in the early 90s just gave me exposure to a sport that was on the rise, but hadn't yet really just took off, right? It was starting to go.
Sort of in that maturation phase,
yeah,
right?
It was shifting to more corporate oriented partnership and popularity, and television brought it in. The whole Days of Thunder, Tom Cruise, Cole Trickle saying, well, you can learn a lot watching the ESPN television coverage on how to drive. But I think ESPN, and if you remember TNN, the Nashville network had Motor Madness and Thursday Night Thunder, and all that's the cable television advent or growth, and they embraced motorsport. They needed content. So did ESPN. And it really started taking the sport to another level. And in that mid-90s to 2000, early 2000 window, that's when it really took off. And they could do nothing wrong. And, it's not the NFL, but it was pretty white hot for a while there. And partners coming in, and the money started to flow and what to do with it. And a bunch of new owners came in, which the sport needed. And it just raised the visibility and awareness. But back to your question, the appeal, think about motorsports, not just NASCAR, but NASCAR as I know it and we know it, compared to other forms of entertainment or sports, for the most part, other than like the PGA, right? the circus is coming to the same place. They're just different places every week, right? So you go to
Right.
Charlotte and Atlanta and Bristol and Daytona, and the whole industry comes to that racetrack. Versus the NFL, there's 2 teams in each city playing on any given weekend, the Major League Baseball, NBA, hockey, soccer. So that's unique in its own right. And then the sport itself, which is another interesting dynamic, you're friendly competitors with everybody in the sport on many levels. So on the team side, you're trying to beat up the people that you want to win, right? You want to compete, you want to win, just like you guys do now. But invariably, you need your competitors' help, right? You always, something breaks, you need a part, you need a friendly team member. And I was amazed at how that just happened when you're trying to, beat the heck out of them to win and finish ahead of your competitors and your peers. You're also competing with them for dollars, right? And I will tell you that the garage area is fiercely competitive, and you have to watch your back many times, right? And you would never take your sponsorship for granted because someone's trying to take it away, right? And that's okay because everyone knows that. And you just understand that, and you protect it, and you try to grow it, and you try to, leverage it. And so you have all that, and then you have team movement. Teams are trying to poach talent away from other teams and drivers. And again, that's like any other business industry, right? It's pretty similar.
Yeah, well, everybody wants their slice of the pie, right? But here you have this situation where the pie just keeps getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we're competing over those pieces, it's this collective that we're all looking toward and we're part of that makes it all happen, right? So it's a cool way that there's this community in racing, community of people around cars, same thing that sounds like it's there in this motorsport.
Yeah, I think that NASCAR did a good job when it started to go hard. They said, all right, wait a minute here. We got to make sure it doesn't get too skewed one way or the other with, we need, when a Coca-Cola comes into the sport, right, or a Save Mart or a Toyota or anybody along those lines, we really would hope that they would invest in these 4 or 5 areas, right? Not just hook up with a team or a track or a driver, do it all, right? So do something with NASCAR, do something with a track, do something with a team, do something with the driver, and do something with the television partner, and then do something in the local community. That's like the holy grail, right? So they started pushing that because, listen, you could figure out a way. The teams are trying to get, all right, for a whole season, it might represent, I remember what it was back in the day, a long time ago. You can get a race for that right now. Couple $2-3 million a year would get you a year as a primary sponsor. And then it started growing, right? Because of your point of costs were going up, visibility is going up. So it started to grow the whole pie. But NASCAR could come in and make you an official partner if they really wanted to and go, here's what you get, and pay us a fraction of what you're going to pay the team. And we'll give you all these assets. So they were smart enough to know that they had to balance that because they needed healthy teams. They needed healthy tracks. They needed it all to work. And they're kind of like the controlling body, if you will. That's a uniqueness about the sport that in the NFL, MLB, NHL, the owners own the league. Well, in our sport, the Francis own the league, right? And they had NASCAR and ISC, the public side of the house with the tracks. Our company, Speedway Motorsports, or SMI, was a public-facing company or publicly traded company. We didn't have a sanctioning body. We just were a track operator with a few other business units, but the Francis controlled the sport, and they had this racetrack business unit that was a public company. This was private. And then you had the teams, and the teams didn't have any ownership in the league back in the day. So you'd sit there on paper. It'd be a great Harvard Business School case study of like, how does this work? Right. And then you have a television partner. Really, everybody's partner is a television partner, right? As you know. So it just all worked because everyone, guys like Richard Petty and Richard Childress and Robert Yates and Jack Roush and all those owners and team and key stakeholders understood that they needed it to work.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, sports like, to your point, football or baseball, they have their home place. They have their stadium. That's where they play. Once in a while, they'll host another team, and then they move on. Here we're talking about this matchmaking between teams and drivers and sponsors and locations in trying to figure out, where do you take this series? What's a good place to go race? Well, there's more aspects than that. There's this sort of business side that helps to cement the whole deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
and
right.
back in the day, I mean, ISC, weren't they involved in an antitrust lawsuit
Oh,
because
yeah.
of that point of they're the sanctioning body and they're the facilities. And of course, ISC owns Daytona, Homestead, and some others. And so where are all your major marquee races going to be? Their tracks.
Those locations.
But that was back in the day, right? Like nowadays, I feel like the relationship between ISC and SMI and like this collaborative effort is more so. It's not, us versus them. I feel like there's a little bit more of getting along and sharing more of the pie, maybe a little bit more equally, or is that kind of still the same of ISC versus SMI?
Versus the world.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think it's evolved into much more of a collaboration. But right now, we have the lawsuit with 2311
That's right.
on the charter side, and the charter is a whole different element from where the sport was and how the ownership or the purse distribution or the prize money was handled and managed back in the day. It was very similar to when Richard Petty started. Your payout was based on your finishing order, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they built in some champion owner money to put some guarantees in place. When you showed up, if you finished last, you were going to make X. But really, the real money was made in the top 5 at the time. And then we used to analyze the heck out of the purse and try to figure out all our models and where we forecast the business and projections. And they went to a charter system, I forget how many years ago, to try to put some guarantees in place. So financial guarantees so that the team owners could go to Save Mart and say, hey, here's a deal. We're going to be guaranteed an entry. Because back in the day, if you had to qualify and there were more cars than there were spots.
All right.
So on Daytona, you might have 65 cars trying to qualify for, at the time, 42 spots. Then they added the Richard Petty Champions provisional spot because he missed a few races after he stepped out of the car. And that was like unheard of. So they had to fix that, so to speak.
And it worked out that it happened to be number 43.
Yeah, right, the 43rd spot. And then, so there was some of that happening. And then you have a one-off, we could start Cold Start Racing, LLC, and we're going to go line up for the Daytona 500. And we buy some equipment from Rick Hendrick, and we buy some of that, and we rub on it. We hire a crew chief, we got a driver, and you go out and run one heck of a lap, and Richard Petty has an off day in qualifying, you get in, he doesn't. So then that's, as it started to grow and the money got bigger, you start to go, hey, wait a minute, how does that happen, right? So they finally arrived at a charter model, which is more of a license, but it gave you some rights and guarantees and things of that nature. And there was a term on that. So that's a whole nother subject. But back to your point of the collaboration and the antitrust, well, they're fighting that right now. But yeah, I think that early in the growth stage, there was always this friendly friction between the sanctioning body and NASCAR and the teams and the other tracks and the drivers, and because everyone, to your point, was trying to get their piece, right? And NASCAR had the visibility of almost all of it, and they kind of had a big hand in a lot of those, the distribution of some of that sponsorship or a large part of that, and they controlled the TV money. Actually, before the TV money, each track cut their own TV deal, and then they finally agreed to roll all their rights together so they could have one negotiation.
Yeah, to transition to maybe a little bit of a lighter topic rather than suits and antitrust law and all that fun stuff. But
Come on.
The transition from old NASCAR back in, the early 2000s to modern day, there's been a great development in the diversity of the tracks that they've been going to. And we've seen, even in these last 5 years, a huge surgence of road courses being put on. So getting to Sonoma Raceway, talking about Sonoma a little bit more here, but back in those early 2000s, you really had 2 road courses, right? You would go to Watkins Glen and Sonoma Raceway. And then in recent, a lot more development of adding more road courses. They even did the road course at Daytona and adding all these exciting new races. And now even street courses, as a fan, super exciting to see them be able to reach out into new demographics. So my question to you is, do you believe that the current schedule for NASCAR is pretty saturated with road courses, or do you think that there's room within the schedule to maybe get a couple more in there?
I would say this, that Watkins Glen and Sonoma Raceway back in the day were the 2 road courses. And then as they started adding some road courses, I think what happened, the sport, they realized they needed to diversify the fan base and the demographic. It hit that white hot hockey stick growth level. And then in 08, 09, the financial crisis, it rolled over a bit. And there was a 4 or 5 year pause there to recover. And it hasn't fully recovered. It's in a different place now, and it's in a good place. But the Brickyard 400, 350,000 people went to those races back in the day. They're not getting that now, right? The Daytona 500 is probably the closest to the level of, they'd get 300,000 at Daytona. They took some seat, they realigned some things. It's 200 plus, right? Everybody else is kind of level set and moderated back to where it's right sized, that heavy growth. We were putting in seats like at will in that mid 90s to mid 2000 era. So I think they realized they've had to go to new markets, right? And the road course made it easy for them to do that. So if you mentioned Daytona, they run the Rolex course there. And then we created the Roval in Charlotte in the October race. They put the street course race in, right, in Chicago. They're going to Mexico this year. They had tried Tokyo. They were doing some stuff at Twin Ring Motegi. They did a road course in Mexico in the past in the lower series race, trucks and Xfinity at Portland. So they're testing all these markets. They did the race in the LA Coliseum, which is not a road course, but that was more motortainment, entertainment to try to get to the LA market. And how do we take our sport and get after the younger generation? And that's a big push. The diversity of our core fan plus the age side of it and getting younger. And, there's a lot of interesting thought around that, because if you think about it with, Uber and the EV side of it, the love affair with the car is kind of changing back from the muscle car days in that era. And it's harder to get the younger generation into motorsports. So they're forcing them and forcing ourselves into blending the entertainment aspect of it. Whereas before, the race and the competition would prevail. And that drew the fan in because of the horsepower and the visceral nature of stock car racing with the noise and then the spectacle that it was back in that heavy growth era. And then the drivers now are a little different. There's some, but there were personalities that they built around, Richard Petty being one of them, Dale Earnhardt being the other, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt, that good cop, bad cop, the intimidator, right? Versus Jeff coming in, the squeaky clean Northern California boy who could race everything, look the part, and they created that on and off the track. So I think the push to the current era is to get to new markets and to try to create a bigger fan base and reach some new fans.
Yeah, and off that, like I've been watching Cletus McFarlane running in the ARCA series and talking about bringing personalities back. I mean, his post-race interviews, Fox is eating it up. I watched the last interview of him at Talladega where you could hear the in-booth announcers snickering and laughing because they just couldn't hold it together. But I mean, it's great entertainment. So it's awesome to see NASCAR starting to take those steps and find that way to gain some new audience, some younger people, and kind of revive that sport again. Find that golden era that they had back way when in the early 2000s and bringing it into the modern era. And even developments with the car has been really interesting and fascinating to see what they've done to this next gen car. And it seemed like they modified from the previous gen, the what was it, 6th gen, 7th gen, into the next gen car of almost making it to work on road courses or work in these different environments a little bit better and a little bit more, and making it a car that can adapt to different situations.
Yeah, no doubt. I think back the evolution of the personality, like you were saying, there were a host of good boy, bad boy, a variety of mix. And I remember Jimmy Spencer, right? He was everybody's bad boy. And, you had Kenny Schrader, who is just colorful in his interviewing, and that's him. He is who you see him as. Richard Petty's the same way. And then as they retired and exited, you kind of they got more vanilla, because now you've got big corporate money. You have to watch what you say, because that's a risk, right?
The stakes are higher. Yeah.
Reputational risk, brand identity risk. So that kind of neutralized some of that personality flair, if you will. And then, you think about Kyle Busch, and he comes in, he's running over everybody, and the sport needed him and needs him still. He had Tony Stewart come in. I mean, he's a former Kyle Larson, right? Kyle runs everything, right? If it's got 4 wheels, maybe even if it has 2 wheels, he's racing it. Tony Stewart was that guy too, right? And Tony's very colorful. And so the sport needs that. And I think it got taken away, or not intentionally, because of what I said about sponsorship and that aspect of communication and public relations. And then moving to the car, right? The evolution of the car, they started to see that whoever had the most money was spending the most money. And, the old saying, how to make $1 million in racing, start with 10. Well, that was true, right? So Rick Hendrick had the resources, and Jack Roush, and you pick all those people, and then you had Richard Petty, right? And Richard Petty, I know this firsthand, he finally sold most of the business in 2008 because he couldn't keep up, right? He couldn't keep up with the Rick Hendricks and Roger Penske's, who had all these businesses. Now, listen, they're not investing just to invest into, but they have multi-prongs to leverage all their businesses to make it work. There's a reason that DuPont was on the 24 car, right? Or Quaker State or Pennzoil's on these cars. There's a business reason, right? And they leverage that. Richard Petty, he could just leverage his persona, and that only took us so far. And NASCAR said, we got to try to figure this out and contain the cost. And the other part of that spend and car of tomorrow, right? That the next gen car was, and this happened in Richard Petty's era. He'd go out and he'd lap the field 5 times, and there's no, he's winning, right? Unless he takes himself out, because there's no competition, and nobody wants to see that kind of race where it runs 200 laps all green, and there's 3 guys on the lead lap, right? So they tried to balance and level the playing field, both from a cost standpoint and investment standpoint. And then I wouldn't call it a spending cap, but they were trying to do that. And in doing so, the first generations of that took the driver out of the car, right? And then it started to just completely level the playing field, and it just was who could set up the car the best way. And then the driver had less input, and therefore he couldn't showcase his ability. And certainly that's not at 100%, but that's what happened. And then they've been working at it, and now I think they're in a really good spot. And they're working on it all the time. You've got the tires, you got the red letter tires, and they're trying different things. So I really believe if you pay attention to what's going on in NASCAR, they're really we call it pulling levers, pulling gears to try to address all of these things and keep the sport moving in that direction and go to new markets and maximize all those opportunities for all the stakeholders, including the fans.
Yeah, it's moving back to making stock cars stock in the sense of spec. And I know that they moved to a carbon fiber body in their panels. You're not able to modify them. And people even look back of like late 2000s, early 2000s cars, and they're like, oh, well, they all look the same. And it's only those of us that know, like, no, that one's shaped like a boomerang, like the side force that they're getting out because they were able to work that sheet metal different than the other guys. And even the Gen 6 car, there was trickery going on of low pressure, high pressure. How do you suck that fender in or pop it out? You can't do those same things with carbon fiber. And, if you're thinning out carbon to make it buckle or flex, NASCAR is going to be able to find it that much easier. So it's cool to see them get back of level playing field. And I think that's why we're able to see new teams come in, 2311 and some of the other teams that are now competitive against some of those bigger names that we've heard for so long. And I think it's a big kudos to NASCAR to start figuring out that formula where we get a mixture of who's winning. It's not always just RCR and Penske. We got some other names in there too.
Right. And it evolves the sport, right? The cars are changing. They're getting more sophisticated. They're getting more expensive, right? So it raises sort of the minimum bar for who's going to step up and try to enter that field. And all the while, there's these other variables about, where are we going to race? What kind of races are those going to be? The road courses bring something different than the ovals do. Where are we going to connect with our fans? And representing here at Sonoma Raceway, being that course where I remember when I went to my first NASCAR race, telling a friend, hey, that was the first right turn they made all season. It was a cool thing to be affiliated with that. And seeing others in that market, it's looking at the relationship of those racetracks together, being part of the conglomerate like SMI. How do you work that? Is there a relationship with the sister tracks? Is there sort of like that higher level view of where we fit in that portfolio as the road course.
Yeah, 100%. Our 11 tracks, right, our brother and sister tracks, we all work together. We have shared resources. There's our leadership team, starting with Marcus, and then our core leadership team. They're constantly looking at all of those things across not only our tracks, but the whole sport. And then the entertainment side of it, be it country music festivals, drag racing, all the different attributes that each facility, we talk about this all the time, each facility has a different nuance, right? So certainly ours is easy to identify our nuance as a road course. And we have a drag strip inside the road course. And then our business unit, as you all know, has tons, almost 300 days a year of day-to-day track rental business, right? Corporate business, car clubs, NASA, Ferrari Challenge, SRO, all of those things. Those don't happen primarily, let's say, at New Hampshire, right? So New Hampshire has its own nuance. And you have Dover, and you have all our different tracks, Charlotte, Atlanta, Bristol, Texas, etc. Las Vegas is a whole nother motortainment complex in its own right. And North Wilkesboro in the foothills there, where Moonshine was, almost, founded, if you will. And they all have different attributes, but our core teams functionally do the same thing, right? We're trying to maximize revenue, run the heartbeat of the company is our NASCAR events, and then all these other support events in and around that. Las Vegas has Electric Daisy Carnival, probably is as big as any NASCAR race that we have, to everything in between, country music festivals and Tough Mudder events and all those other things that happen at these facilities to try to maximize the real estate and the asset utilization. So we're constantly sharing best practices, resources. For example, here we'll bring in probably 40 people from all the different tracks to help and support the event, because all of the characteristics are largely the same.
Yeah, you're putting on these events here, and you just have to pick and choose which ones align well with the location, the facility. I'm always curious about, how do we make these decisions about what new races are coming? Are you pitching the race series and the sanctioning bodies, or are they shopping around to different tracks to try to get a foot in the door and have an opportunity to be at a place like here in wine country, come be at Sonoma Raceway for racing?
That's another really good question. I think I don't sit in that room, but I've been around it enough to where, back to who controls the sport or who's kind of the sanctioning body, they largely are driving those kind of the growth part of that and where to go and how to go and when to go. Mix in road courses, short track. They did Bowman Gray this year on the Clash, which was the former Coliseum race, which was the Daytona race, which started Speed Week back in the day. From that standpoint, they're talking to the key stakeholders. So to your point earlier about the collaboration, Sylas, they are looking at how can we maximize this. First, one of the first three calls are Speedway Motorsports, television partners, and key sponsors and teams, right? So they certainly will make the call, but I think they start weighing in. And consistency of schedule, as you know, is important. Our race got moved back 6 weeks. That was largely driven by the new TV deal, where for the last, I think, over 10 years, Fox had the first half, NBC had the second half. Starting this year, Fox and NBC each gave up 5 races. So there's 10 races that came back into the pool. And then Amazon Prime and Warner Brothers Turner picked up the other 5, and they asked, all the bench racing and jockeying that you just asked about. I'm sure whoever came up with the schedule, all of the above, all the stakeholders decided that we were going into the Turner window, and all these other races got divided out. And there was some pretty good movement this year in the calendar.
Yeah, I think as race fans, we don't think about that interdependency of all those different entities. We're just saying, oh, can't we bring IMSA back to Sonoma? What would that take? Or, there's all these things about the calendar. And even at a high level, Formula One just rejiggered their schedule this year. The Japan race that would usually happen in October just happened here in April. So there's ways to do that, but the number of different factors that must weigh into those decisions, I don't think people can really appreciate, all of those stakeholders that need to be at the table to make it happen. Think about connecting with that younger generation of racers too. There's different ways to sort of plant those seeds to get that grassroots support where people grow up thinking about motorsports. I was raised in sort of a baseball and basketball family. I didn't find motorsports till into my adult years, very, very well into my adult years, I should say. So I'm like a little kid about it and I think about it that way. But the opportunities for young people, given the changes in car culture and technology, what are some ways by which, as a premier racetrack operation, how do you connect with that community? How do we, in addition to putting on the big name series, what are the kind of events and outreach and support that do you guys do to think about, bringing that next set of kids out to the racetrack, making them excited about the prospect of getting in a car, getting in a cart, whatever that vehicle might be, but just to really connect with it in a way so that they have that fondness to look back on, I remember growing up and this is a thing I want to do later in life.
Yeah, something we talk about all the time. Executing that and acting on that it's a challenge because it's so vast. Karting is a great way to do that. It's easier to get people, although it's not necessarily inexpensive, right? Karting is a great opportunity. Legend cars, we have legend cars not here, but across the system, Bandoleros, legend cars, outreach to the local high schools and colleges and internships and things of that nature, trying to get events that will bring them in that we can run, and some ones we might invest in versus worried about making money. It might be looked at as an investment. Just getting people to the facility is the best way we have an opportunity to connect with the fan, whether it's younger, mid-level, or older. And we talk about that constantly, and it's easier said than done, but that's our effort.
I'm sure. Yeah, it takes that sort of diversity of options to get people out.
You mentioning legends and bandoleros, I know that that's kind of like underneath the umbrella for SMI, which is really cool for them to kind of promote one of those entry-level series and help grow people getting into short track, circle track racing. Have you ever considered trying to host maybe like a Bandolero Legends road course event up at like the karting track? Or even, I know Velocity a couple years, they did a little demo of sprint cars in turn 11, of maybe even the potential of turning turn 11 into a flat track, circle track, and maybe hosting some like Thursday night under the lights Legends Bandolero racing.
That's a really good point. Maybe we ought to make you our adjunct, director of development, program development.
Sign here.
Yeah, the sprint car was very interesting, right? Mm-hmm. You saw that. We've kind of casually talked about it. I wouldn't say we've gone much further than that. That can be made an oval for something like a legend car, a Bandolero car, because the speed it allows you to have the K-rail and be safe and put it on and have some fun with that. That's an interesting thought, right? As far as, I haven't talked about it recently here with legend cars on the track in turn 10, 11. I don't know that a road course could probably host a road course event for a big national legends event, but we'd have to run that up the flagpole. But it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think another way is to kind of connect with the young people, right? They love their drifting. They can't get enough of that stuff, and having the opportunity to come out to the racetrack and see their heroes doing that and maybe even have a chance to participate. I think those kind of events have really helped to sort of catalyze a group of potential drivers and motorsports fans who we haven't seen before. Drag racing is another one, right? The Wednesday night drags, I remember coming out to that. That even got me interested to the point where I went and got my NHRA license and did a little bit of drag racing, maybe following a Tony Stewart path or something like that. But those kind of events, I think, really help people connect. I'm just curious, like, how does that development process look like? Is there the brain trust that sits up in the admin building that says, okay, guys, what are we going to do? And how are we going to find that next adjunct to the sport or, platform or whatever that is to really make that connection?
Yes to all the above. We actually just had a meeting earlier today about teen safe driving, right? So there's an opportunity. We had a program, it went away. We've got a great base of customers. It's such a great program for all the right reasons. We're going to turn that back on. So we had a meeting today, ironically, or coincidentally, and that's an opportunity. And the rest is just trying to fit in different things, or take the Wednesday night drags or the drift program that we had. And there's all kinds of dynamics. So sometimes your target audience doesn't end up being the audience that arrives. And then it causes you to go, oh, okay. and then it changes how you operate it. And everything isn't P&L driven, but you have to pay attention to that. So, we're running fewer Wednesday night drag events, mainly the demands on the daily track schedule, which then pinches our ability to do drags. We've got a very restrictive use permit. It is what it is. So it limits our ability to do some of those things. But we're always looking for those types of things. And the people love the drag events. We wish we could do more of them. We're looking at more dates on the calendar, but we can only do those Wednesday nights, right? It's very restrictive in our use permit. And then we have to be careful that we don't violate that. And listen, kind of like race car drivers, we like to interpret the rules. No one ever cheats, right? You guys, no one ever cheats.
It's innovation.
Innovation, that's right.
Innovation, but it's just all those factors you're constantly looking at all that. And then you take the facility, and as you all know and can see, the facility consumes cash because of the nature of the facility and the age and the expansive nature of being on 1,600 acres and all the different areas on property. If we had an asphalt company, we could pave everything on this, not just the track, the parking lots, the runoff area, the ring roads. We could do that all year, landscaping and facilities. And that's our charge, right? So that's our burden. But I can tell you, back to your question about how our leadership looks at all the racetracks, we're constantly fighting over CapEx, right? And there's maintenance CapEx, or operating CapEx, maintenance CapEx, and then there's growth CapEx. We all love growth CapEx, but we also have to balance the need for when the air conditioners are getting 25 years old and they're breaking, or things in the industrial park need to be freshened and all that. And there's only so much that we can do. So we've got 5-year plans, and then in 1 year into the 5-year, we have to adapt it because something comes up or a water main breaks, or that's just the nature of the property.
Sure. I think the complexities in running a facility like this, people can easily overlook. First of all, the scale of the property, because people know the main racetrack. They might not know about the karting track. They might not know about the huge preserve of land around this place until you see the sheep or the goats out there helping to manicure it and maintain it. You have a place where it's active, like you said, nearly 300 days a year. The sun's beaten down on pavement. That's not going to help it flourish. It's the kind of thing that takes wear over time. So just the number of moving parts it takes to keep all that running. And you're part of this community. You mentioned the use permit, right? Being part of the community such that the people around here want to support what's happening here versus feeling aggrieved by the fact that there's some sound that travels to a place that didn't used to be developed, but now maybe there's some people trying to live near the racetrack and they're not maybe as happy about some of those things. So I think those outreach methods, the ways by which we bring people in, are just as important as being, sort of a good citizen in the community, and offering avenues to people to, have that path, a place to go, a safe place to be, a place to be with family, a place to be with others who are excited about the kind of activities that are taking place there. And it's just, there's a lot to manage. I mean, even the largest premier racetracks in the world, among which I think we definitely consider Sonoma, all have this problem, right? And they've all had to go out and repave their track every couple of years and find out how hard that is to do and try to learn from others' experience and just to keep on top of that stuff, right? It's a constant moving thing. It's like an organism of its own, and feeding and caring for it looks pretty complicated from afar. I can imagine up close how much there really is to do there.
That's exactly right. The terrain, if you take our Sonoma Raceway, all the elements, right? You mentioned sun, rain, right? In the winter, wreaks havoc, right? Drainage, the hill, drainage that probably needs to be updated, and the track, and erosion and water intrusion and the red frog and all that stuff that the endangered species that, listen, we're all sensitive to that. The neighbors, the community, there's all these competing interests. Most of the time we're lined up, right? And we always want to be a good corporate citizen. We're very good at that because our leadership and the Smith family, that is first and foremost, right? It's one of their driving principles. But then there's reality and trying to balance that. To your point earlier about exposure and access to the community and embracing that and getting people here, there's things that we can do, and we have talked about in the past that we probably should put on the front burner. There's easy things like we could come out and drive a lap on the track and have an open house here and there, and manage some of those fun things because we have such a fun story, we get to come to work every day to this, right? And it's so, I say this all the time to our team and then with my colleagues and peers, we're just so lucky and fortunate to work for the Smith family because they're easy to follow. And then, we get to hang around cool cars and cool people. And I mean, we're in the memory making business, right? When people get out of the car, they're smiling from ear to ear. And it's such a bucket list item for the most part. And we see it every day. So we're blessed.
Yeah, I think getting people on the track is such a catalyzing event, right? I remember I've driven past this place a bazillion times before I ever stepped foot into the paddock. Getting up on the racetrack and seeing the view around the racetrack, having the opportunity even just to drive the ring road. And you realize how far you can see from here on a clear day. You can see all the way to San Francisco. You see wine country. It's such a special place. And I think exactly to your point of that memory making, it's deeply ingrained in my brain, these experiences that I've had here. And I think it's so important to find that next set of folks and have them come here and get to experience those same things, whether that's watching a NASCAR race, coming out for NHRA, or what are some of the other series that you like to keep up with just personally?
All racing, just racing. To back to your question earlier about what's special about it, what drew me to it, it's a great sport. Love our sport at NASCAR. I've got XM on all the time. NASCAR is just a unique sport. And knowing all the people and the players and the stakeholders makes it, certainly watch and pay attention to a lot of other sports and things of that nature. But I'm a NASCAR guy and sit next to Richard Petty and the Smith family and our company. It's pretty easy to do. So it's hard to wander much from there.
I'd imagine. Have you had a chance to be behind the wheel?
I've been behind the wheel in my career. Back in the heyday, we'd go to. I'd be the non-racer guy that would be the test driver. So if we went to a new track under the Richard Petty driving experience, the guy Brian get in the car and give us. We know what we're experiencing. Tell us what you think. So I did a lot of that. I didn't do a ton of it, but enough of it. And then I drive this track a lot. And I get here early, and we're always looking at the track from multiple perspectives. And, how's it look? How is the asphalt holding up? How's the walls look? How's the landscape? Safety? We hear about things on the course the day before you go check it out. And it just familiarizes me with, that perspective, which every time you drive the track, as you all know, every lap can be different. Every corner can be different. How you enter, how you exit. And it's the same in a passenger car. And I take different routes. I'll take, 4A and go take the chute or around the carousel, which when I first started coming here, they ran the carousel in the NASCAR, that configuration. And I don't know if you watch ESPN. I don't know what network it was on at the time, but Gary Bechtel, one of our cars, John Krebs, got launched and went over into the embankment. We lost visibility of him, and he just went airborne and got bumped and into the carousel. It was crazy. And I don't know if there was a top 10 on ESPN back in the day, but it would have been number one for that day.
Didn't he end up upside down?
He did. It was crazy.
It's one of the most glorious wrecks you've ever seen at Sonoma.
Yeah.
The thing just disappears out of frame, and you're like,
it just went
did he
over.
end up in a lake? Like, what is over there?
I think there's a retention pond. I think there's a creek down there, which is a runoff area. He went into that. He just got airborne.
How about the future for Sonoma? What are the things we look forward to? What are the new events, new approaches? The reusing things that we've had here, the resources that make up this place. What's sort of on the roadmap that you can share?
Yeah, I think for this year and next, we're pretty focused on, we moved our date back. We're trying to get more efficient in how we run, how to plus up our current event to attract that new fan. Talk to a couple college groups and, getting the fan out here the first time is easier, believe it or not. We track all this than getting them to come the second time. If we can get them the second time, that's the key. If you get them the second time, you got them for 5 years plus. But that first time fan is great, but getting them to come back the second time is a focus that our company pays a lot of attention to. But back to your question, we're just looking at how do we do what we have bigger, better, more efficient, get the fans in and out better, faster, ingress, egress. These are all under the radar type of things. Our use permit limits us to what we can and can't do. So we think there'd be a great country music festival. No, that's not in the making. Other motorsports events, like the Ferrari Challenge, is a big important event. They're all important, right? California Superbike, SRO, NASA, Hooked on Driving, all those AMG Driving Academy. We've got Lexus coming in this weekend. They all matter. The karting facility is a growth opportunity for us to do a couple things, showcase that event. There's a great following in this region. That kart track is very well respected, as is our road course. And, the younger demographic is appealing. So we're looking at how can we do some more with that business unit and grow that fan base, which will do a couple things for us. And then just some other fun, unique events that we're trying that kind of fall within our use permit. We haven't landed on anything, but the next couple of years is improve the facility, put some money back in. Turn 11, certainly a couple of years ago, was a game changer for us in a large way. I don't think we would still have the penetration and corporate clientele that we have, but I don't think would have had Ferrari 3 years in a row without that building, and Mercedes-Benz now coming on a regular basis with their driving academy. We would get spot appearances on the calendar, off the calendar, but that utilization is just ramped up because of that building. So we're looking at some other things on the property, some OEM relationships that we could make more permanent, semi-permanent. How can we take that certain lot up the hill there and make more asphalt out of it and create more skid pad teaching elements? You all know the motor club is at least on the discussion block. It's far away probably, but maybe not so 5 years out, 3 to 5 years out. But that's very much in our thought process.
That's great. I think there's so many different sort of cultural aspects that people overlook with the different types of events that happen. The OEMs bring out people who buy a certain kind of car. They have their own demographics. The different race series each have their own sort of special flavor. You come out here for NHRA, it feels a lot different than coming out here for SRO. It feels different than coming out for NASCAR. It's one of those things where all of these things are happening at the same place, right? So you have to represent all these different constituencies and provide a facility that sort of caters to all of them. I think Turn 11 has definitely done that for a lot of folks, brought in groups who now see a place for them to be and to host their events and occasions here as well. And who knows where it goes next, really.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool about Sonoma for me is you can come to the same facility and see those drastic different things. You can watch drag racing. You guys put on Winter Jam at the end of the year. You can come watch drifting. You can put yourself on track with your own streetcar. You can come here to a school. NASCAR comparative to all these other racing series. This place is so special because it attracts that variety. And I think it's one of the best spectator road courses in the country, if not the world. I mean, name another place that you can stand or sit in one seat and see 90% of the track. I mean, you've been up at the Turn 9 Terrace. Mm-hmm. What a gorgeous view that is, and is unlike any other facility. The elevation change and the hills that surround this place just make it unbelievably special. And I'm sure that was one of those appeals for you of like, all right, if I'm going to continue to work in the industry and I get to choose a track that I get to go work at, I mean, Sonoma isn't half bad for a lot of those reasons.
Well, Director of Development, Program Development, NPR, and Communications, right there. You got two checks in the box there. Yes, we're biased. It's a special place, special facility. It doesn't make us better or worse. It has its own set of nuances and attributes and assets, and we love them, and we try to leverage them. And like we say all the time, we get most of it right, and then we find out in any given day that we have a good opportunity to get better because we didn't meet the expectations, or we misstepped, or we chose to turn right and we should have turned left. But most of the time we get it right. There's a great foundation in place, but there's so much to do and see. The vantage points that you speak of are tremendous, and you can't see that everywhere else and get that anywhere else in a road course environment. And listen, going to Daytona 500 is an unbelievable experience, right? And going to the Coke 600 is another unbelievable experience. Every race is a great experience, and ours is no different, right? So that's the beauty about the sport as well. There's all kinds of variety. You got short track racing, intermediate track, you got rovals, you got street courses, real road courses, super speedway, and everything in the mix. And, you get the Bristol night race, something unbelievable. Have you ever been? If you haven't been, you should go.
We talk a lot about night racing. We'd love to see night racing. Any prospect of that coming to Sonoma?
Yeah, I don't think so anytime soon. I can share that with you. Probably not anytime soon. However, back to it, Bristol, they're hosting a Major League Baseball event in August. They're touting it as the largest attended Major League Baseball game ever, and I think they're expecting 150,000 people. And they're getting ready to twist and turn that facility crazy.
Are they like bringing in turf for the infield, and they're just going to build like a baseball stadium on the inside?
Yes, I'll send you a link, but you should go check it out online. They're going to twist it around, and they're knocking a building down, which they'll build it back differently, and a bit massive scoreboard, and it's just incredible what they're going to do to that facility. Now, they had a football game there. Tennessee played Virginia Tech 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe. I forget that it was before COVID. And that was an unbelievable mesh of talk about demographic in Bristol with UT, who travels so well, and Virginia Tech, and you had all country music people and college game day and Dale Jr. And so there's fun, great opportunities. I think we've got some fun stuff coming with the Food Network, which is part of Turner and Warner Brothers, and how we blend some of that entertainment with the motorsports and take advantage of those assets.
Interesting. Anything you can share regarding the Food Network?
Yeah, the ingredients are being put together.
You're in the right place. There's a lot of foodies around here.
Yeah, I was going to say wine country is perfect.
Absolutely. I did recently see that USA Today does this thing where they have best of groups every year. And I just want to say congratulations on being listed as, I think it was among the best NASCAR tracks in the U.S. Sonoma's right up there. So if you all go out to the USA Today and make sure you vote for Sonoma.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for joining us, Brian, taking the time and sharing love for Sonoma. I think all of us in this room love this place, and it's magical, and it's good to see that it's in good hands, and hopefully we get to see some new exciting stuff in the future, and some of those other events that have been on the calendar forever, add in a little extra spice here and there.
And thrilled to be able to continue to call this place our home track. It makes us feel so, I don't know, like activist about what happens here. We care. We have a stake in it. We feel like we really want to somehow have an opportunity to tell somebody this is what we think would be cool here. So we appreciate the opportunity for this conversation too.
Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate caring. It's important. You can see the passion that everybody has around Sonoma Raceway, all our different stakeholders, and we love it. And thank you for having me, and let's do it again. And I love talking racing and Sonoma Raceway and Speedway Motorsports and the entire sport. We're just very blessed.
Well, thanks for being here. Idling with Brian Flynn here at Sonoma Raceway. This has been Cold Start.
Thanks for listening.